It's your boy, Dr. Leroy McKenzie Jr., coming to you again for another episode of the brand new development series. And y'all know, brought to you by JNF Enterprises and Black Professional Men. It is our mission to ensure the future of the African American male. And one of the ways that we do that is by bringing you great content like this, where we talk about the professional you and the personal you, dealing with that. And tonight is going to be no different than any of the other times that we've come before you. Try to bring you just some of the country's most inspirational, innovative, creative type of individuals, both in the professional realm and in the personal realm, that can help you from a personal aspect and a professional aspect. And that's what we're going to be doing tonight as well. And it's no different. So I want to get right into this conversation, and I want to introduce to some, for those that may not be familiar with this gentleman, um, Pastor Cedric Nelms, who is out on the left coast, out in California. We're going to have a great conversation this evening about just some of the phenomenal things that he's doing from a pastoral perspective with the church, but then also from an entrepreneurial perspective as well, and what he's doing that to have a great impact in the community that he serves, both as pastor, but then also as an entrepreneur. And I'm going to let him. Let him introduce himself and tell us just a little bit about who he is. Are you there, Pastor? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Glad to be here with you, brother.
Absolutely, absolutely. And thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to come in and talk with us about the brand new development and the great things that you're doing out there in California. And I want you to start off, if you can, by just introducing yourself to people and telling them just a little bit about who Pastor Cedric Nelms is, and how you came to be who it is that you are today.
Well, as my brother Dr. Leroy has already stated, Cedric Nelms. I am born and raised in Los Angeles, so I'm an LA guy. Went to college down at one of the premier HBCUs. I went to none other than the Morehouse College in Atlanta, Georgia, and so did that and came back to LA, got my calling, and so I wear a number of hats. First of all, I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm a son. Have parents who live in Arlington, Texas, and I'm a pastor. But then I'm also for what I call my job, which is what pays me. Community organizer for an organization that deals with, that's a nonprofit organization that deals with educational equity. And then I'm also founder, CEO, executive director for Community Bridge Connectors Resource Center, which is a resource center we actually started in the midst of the pandemic. We launched it June of 2020.
Okay.
And it has 4 pillars: youth engagement, career development, health and wellness, and basic needs. And we are also in the preparation stage to launch our Image Makers Academy. Our Image Makers Academy sits under the umbrella of the Resource Center. But the Image Makers Academy is for youth and transitional age youth who are transitioning out of foster care. And so we're going after 16 to 24-year-olds, and it's a skill development program. So we're going to help them find out what their strengths are and how to use those strengths to move into 2 pathways: educational pathway and a entrepreneur or career pathway. And the other organization that I head up, I'm the founder for, is called Legacy Bridge. And Legacy Bridge is more dealing with land acquisition, real estate, purchasing of real estate, but also real estate development
Okay.
and it'll be more in lines with some civic engagement work as well. So that's it in a nutshell about who I am and what I do, and how I keep myself overly busy.
Absolutely. Definitely. That's definitely a plateful, if you will. It's definitely a plateful. Now, can you talk, and let's start our conversation off by just talking a little bit about how you got into ministry and then the entrepreneurship piece to what you do. Was the ministry first and then the entrepreneurship piece, or was it the entrepreneurship piece and then the and then the ministry part?
That's a good question. That's a good question. You know what? You know what, Dr. Leroy? I think it was, man. I, I I think it kind of, there was always this reverberation of the entrepreneurial piece,
Okay.
and I've just come to realize that it was something that was always there. And what I mean by that is, um, my dad was and still is very entrepreneurial. My dad always purchased property. My dad was
Mm,
always buying real estate. At
mhm.
one time, my dad was looking at buying a community mom and pop liquor store. So my dad has always been entrepreneurial.
Okay.
His father, my paternal grandfather, was a grocer and worked at a grocery store, and that was his business. Um, my great grandfather on my mother's side was a mason by trade, and
Okay.
so if you go to Baylor University, there are bricks in their original buildings that my grandfather was one of the ones who built those buildings.
Mm,
So I say that to say it was always in my DNA. I just didn't realize it until I didn't realize it until I planted our church. And so from doing that, that kind of woke up that entrepreneurial spirit inside of me when I started our church
okay.
some 12 years ago, as a church plant, which was something that was totally out of the norm for me, because it's like, why you plant churches when you got a dozen churches that need pastors? But that wasn't the call that I had on my life. It was
Mm.
to start something original, something a little bit different. So I would say in response to your question, the entrepreneurial piece was always there, but the church and ministry piece is what brought that to the surface.
Now let me see. Now you said you've been preaching and an entrepreneur for how many years now?
Whew, I have been in ministry for 23. I've been in ministry for about 24, 25 years.
Okay.
I've been pastoring for the last going on 12 years.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. And then I've been in this entrepreneurial space, I'd say probably about a good 12, 13, 14 years.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now I
Because I
want you to, if you can, talk to me about what it looked like coming into both of those spaces, when you first came into them, and then what it looks like now, and that how it shifted, changed, because we're into this. We're kind of what, almost 3 decades into the 21st century. So
yes.
what has that looked like for you from your perspective?
Well, I mean, when I first came into it, man, I was scared. I'm not gonna lie to you, I was scared as hell. Because I didn't, it's one of those things to where you don't, and this is really, to go forward, to come back. This is really why the Image Makers Academy is, I hold so dear to me, because it's actually going to help young people figure out their wiring and figure out who they are, and see if I'd gone through some classes and learned about that I had this little entrepreneurial bug,
Mhm.
I probably would have taken a different route academically. I would have
Mm,
majored in something different at Morehouse instead of majoring in biology, because
mm.
my mom wanted me to be a pharmacist. You know
Okay.
what I'm saying? So it's one of those things, man, to where, and when I first got into it, I was scared because there was no certainty. When you do entrepreneurial stuff, That doesn't mean that you're gonna get a paycheck every
Yep.
2 weeks. That doesn't mean that it means it's gonna be some long nights. It means that you're gonna have a lot of what I call throwing spaghetti against the wall and seeing what sticks. You're gonna have a lot of naysayers, and sometimes those naysayers have your DNA. They who you sat down and ate Frosted Flakes with.
I like that. I like that.
You know what I'm saying? It's who you ate Frosted Flakes with. They the ones who saying, no, you shouldn't do that. And so it brings about, it really brings about, man, you strengthening the muscle of faith. You know, being an entrepreneur, man, is faithfulness in spite of what you might see. So you really do live out that scripture where that says, you know, blind faith. You know, we talk about faith in those things unseen. You know, that's what an entrepreneur is to me. But I was scared when we first started. I was scared on the entrepreneurial side. On the church planting side, I really planted the church initially out of church hurt. So I was very angry on that front because I was coming out of a situation to where, you know, I felt violated. I felt hurt. So I didn't do some things right when we first planted.
Yeah. And that seems to be a lot of people's story when it comes to the church these days. And we'll talk a little bit more as we get into, because I'd like for you to talk about your ministry. And can you tell us a little bit about it? And then we'll get into the business, your entrepreneurship too. But you talked about how you started it, you know, and the premise of it starting and everything like that. So talk a little bit about the ministry, and then the ministry itself, and how the area where you are physically, how you use that to be able to meet the needs of the community that you are part of.
Yeah, no, our church, Chosen Generation Fellowship Church, is based on 1 Peter chapter 2, verses 9 to 10, that you know, royal priesthood. You were once a people without grace. Now you've been brought into grace. So it's a chosen generation, and that's the name of our ministry. Our church is what is considered a micro church, and a micro church is a church that's less than 1,000 people, a budget that's less than, I'd say less than 100,000, but probably more like less than 50,000 as far as your budget is concerned. So it's a little bit more intimate. It's a little bit more quote unquote touchy feely, to where they have access to me. You know, they don't have to go through a secretary or a team of people. We just got commissioned as a organized church in our denomination.
Okay.
Our denomination is a Reformed church in America, and we're part of the churches here in California that are part of that denomination. And so, yeah, our ministry, man, at one time I thought we had a young adult ministry until I sat in a session and I figured out that they consider seniors 55 and over. And I'm saying, well, hold on, man, hold on. You stepping on a lot of people's toes. So when I looked at our church based on that, we really have more of a seasoned senior ministry with some young adults and youth thrown in there as well. And so yeah, our church, man, it's a beautiful church. It's predominantly African American, but we do have some Caucasians as part of our church. We have Latinos as part of our church. You know, I think from an ethnic perspective, we cover the spectrum because we have Belizeans that are part of our church. We got some Japanese, some German, you know, so ethnically, we are very diverse. Culturally, we're more predominantly African American. So,
wow, and I like that because, and now we'll talk a little bit about this too once we get into that project that you're doing. To me, it's about what I call a new approach to sin, and that's not SIN, it's CIN, and that's commitment to impacting the needs of the community.
Yes.
So that community, whatever that community looks like, it's about, hey, what's the need that's there, and those needs that can be addressed, whether it's directly in your congregation that you have, or the outside community that your church is a part of. It's about addressing those needs.
Yes.
There's certain needs that are
Yeah.
going to be, no matter what it
And
is.
I think
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
right.
Can you hear me?
And I think because our church area is not set up to be in one space time. So we have moved around as far as our location is concerned.
Okay.
And because of that, we're very intentional with being sure that wherever we are planted, that we work in that community. So if we're in Long Beach, we're gonna work and we're gonna pour ourselves into Long Beach. If we're in South LA, we're gonna work and we're gonna pour ourselves into South LA. If we're in Hollywood, we're gonna work and pour ourselves into Hollywood. Wherever we are, we're gonna be sure that we are indoctrinating ourselves politically, socially, economically, in that city. And so we're going to do that. And that's the other thing with being a small church. We get the opportunity to kind of move and be a little bit more fluid and agile in how we do ministry.
Absolutely. Now, talk to me about your business that you have as well. How did you get started with that, and tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, with the business, with our resource center and our legacy bridge, I got started with that based on just kind of seeing that we needed something else. Church needed, even before the pandemic, Dr. Leroy, I saw that churches needed to do something else.
Yeah.
Church was struggling with trying to get people in. And so as I've shared with folks, there was an epidemic before there was a pandemic. Church-wise, the church was dealing with an epidemic. And so what else is it that we needed to generate more reaching out than inviting folks to come in? And that's where the resource center got started. Plus, it was something that my wife and we kind of live into on a more regular basis, because we always want to be sure that we're doing for people. And sometimes it's not about giving a person a fish. It's not about teaching a person how to fish, but our belief system is you got to teach people how to own the pond. Because if you can teach people how to own the pond, then that means those people can go teach somebody else how to own their pond. So it's not about giving folks a handout. It's not about really giving folks a hand up. It's about leveraging resources so that people can become owners. And so that's the premise of why we started the resource center in the first place.
And I love that you said that, because one of my business associates, Terrence Dixon, he owns a restaurant here, Terra Cafe. To me, it's the best restaurant here in Baltimore. But he talks about owning the bricks, owning the communities that we have, and being that. So I love that you said that. But then too, when you said that, it made me think about the movie One Night in Miami. There's a scene where Malcolm is he's boring into Sam Cooke. I mean, he letting Sam have it. I mean, for real. And he's leaning on him. He's talking about Sam. He said something to Sam about what he could do from the perspective that he was, because he was one of the big voices, singers of that particular era and everything like that. And he had this platform, and Malcolm wanted them to do more on the platform. And he was talking about that, and Sam Cooke talked to me. He said, I don't want to talk about owning a piece of the pie. He said, I want to own the recipe. And he said, I want to own the recipe. And he broke down about his records and stuff like that and his artists. And he said that was just so, I mean, it was so key. He went into saying that one of his artists had a song, and Malcolm was saying, well, your songs hadn't charted and done this and done that. And Sam Cooke was like, yeah, okay, I understand that, I'll do that. He said, but here's the thing. He said one of his artists had a song and it was like 99 on the chart or whatever. But
Right.
there was another white group that bought it. And I want to say not the Beatles, but maybe the what's the one that Mick Jagger?
Rolling Stones.
Rolling Stones. It was like the Rolling Stones or somebody like that. Bought the rights to use the song, right? Song went to #1. And Sam Cooke said, do you know who got paid because of the Rolling Stones having a #1 song? He said the publisher. He said, I got a piece of it. He said, and whoever the artist was, I want to say Muddy Williams, somebody, he said, as a result of that, him being the writer of the song, he got a piece of that. Right. That's what he was talking about. So when you talk about understanding and not just being able to fish, teach them how to fish, but owning the pond. Owning that pond means that we own where we live. We own the community that we dwell in. You know, so I think that is so important that you brought that up. It's not just about, you know, teaching somebody how to fish or knowing how to fish and everything like that, but it's about understanding that we can, you know, we can also own the pond. We should own the pond and the leverage that comes along with that.
Right. Yeah. And we have to do that. I mean, because we spent too much time sharecropping. We've spent too much time thinking that we owned the land that we didn't own because we were paying rent on some land that was told that we'll give you, and that was supposed to be our 40 acres and a mule, but we were paying for that 40 acres and a mule. So, you know, it becomes one to where and it's biblical. You know, you're supposed to be the head, not the tail. You're supposed to be the lender, not the borrower. You're supposed to be above and not beneath. So how do we take ownership? And like you said, it's a buddy of mine that we get into good trouble. And we talk about buying back a block, buying, not only owning our home, but owning homes on the block, or owning commercial buildings that then can be converted into spaces to where the next generation can create. Because this generation, we can say what we want to say about them, but they're truly innovators.
Right.
And they are given the space to really figure out what their skills are and really lean in on that. We can see something out of our communities that we've never seen before.
Right. Absolutely. And I love that. And so, like you said, that next generation that's behind us, they have access to so much more than what, you know, than what we had. And that's the way it should be.
Right.
It is, I believe it's every generation's responsibility to make it better for the next generation.
Right.
Because when we do that, there should be an advancement in what we're doing. And I think that we, and I'm talking about those of us that are in our 60s, 50s, and 40s, we've dropped the ball in being able to make sure that next generation is taken care of, whether it's like you were saying, economically, educationally, in all those aspects of life that we need. And we have to, because like you said, they are some of the most creative, you know, folks that I've seen. I was watching a YouTube today, and I don't know if you're familiar with the guy's name is Anthony O'Neill. But he's a great finance guy, talks about money, talks about creating wealth and those things. But he had a young lady on there, 28 years old, just 28 years old. Her and her husband owned 28 properties.
Wow.
And she was talking about the things that they were doing and that they do. And one of the things that she did, she took a hotel or a former hotel and she turned it into a transitional home. I'm- and I'm like, that's the creativeness, man. I was just like, wow.
How,
It's
how would it look, man? How would it look to buy a hotel and use that property to build houses on that land?
Yep. Yep.
To then help single mothers, single fathers, young couples.
And
To
hers was
move
for
it,
foster care. That foster, I
you know what
think
I'm saying?
foster care,
Right,
aging
right.
out,
Which,
stuff like
which,
that.
which, which is a whole population that sometimes we don't talk about. To
Right.
those that are transitioning out of foster care,
Mhm.
that then we can teach them financial literacy, get them going as far as either they're going to go to school, either they're going to do an entrepreneurial career, or they're going to do a combination of both. Teach them financial literacy to where in their the house mortgage is covered until they are able to receive that wholeheartedly, turn that deed over to them and say, it's your house now, to where in it pretty much gets gifted or wielded to them, but they've gone through the principles of learning financial literacy to where now they can keep that house. And you got a whole community of former foster youth that are now homeowners.
Mhm.
That's tremendous, man. That is tremendous.
Blew me away. I was like 28 years old, 28 properties. I was like
28
that.
years old, 28 property. You know what me and you were at 28?
I know, right?
Can't share that right now, but
Exactly. So
I was trying to
you're
buy my first
absolutely,
house at 28.
yeah, you're absolutely right about how innovative and forward thinking that the next generation is, and what
Yes.
they want to do, what they're able to achieve, what they've done, and we have to foster that and point to young ladies like her and say, see what they're
Yeah.
doing. This is
Yeah.
this is the blueprint for what you can look like. This is the blueprint for what we need to do. This is what we need to be doing. And I'll send you the YouTube so you can
Please.
see it
Please do.
and watch it, because
Yeah.
it's phenomenal. It's really great
Please.
that I was really like, wow, this young lady is on it and on to something, because she's not thinking inside this box. I call it the 21st century way of thinking. And I'm gonna put
Mhm.
that to you. What does the 21st century ministry mean to you? And then what does it look like to you?
Whew. 21st century ministry looks to me very different. So for me, 21st century ministry is not my mother and father's ministry. It looks different. There are some tenements, there are some remnants of what ministry looked like for my mother and father, but then there are some nuances to it. And what I mean by that is, one of the questions that we asked with our resource center was, what is the role of faith institutions in the economic well-being of a city?
Wow.
Because
Wow.
back in the day, when you looked at my grandparents and great-grandparents' church, anything that went on, it got funneled through the church. And in particular, it got funneled through the Black church.
Correct. Correct.
So if cousin Nook got out of jail and he came to grandmama's house, grandma was gonna take him to the church.
Mhm.
If a kid was acting up, take him to church. If you need a job, go to church. If you needed food, go to church. If you needed to know what was going on politically in your city,
Yep.
you went to church. So why not? And this is my response to what the church has been in the 21st century. It has to be the curator and sustainer of economic well-being in their city. Whatever city it is that you're in, that's what that faith institution, that ministry has to be. And how I look at it is, it's one of, it's in a mathematical equation. It's ministry times variable. Your variable, a ministry has determined what their variable is.
Mhm.
What is going to be your variable? You do ministry well, But church in the 21st century is not going to be able to live off of tithes and offering because people aren't giving like that. Our 30-year-olds, the young lady that you referenced, my older children who are 35 and 31, they're not giving to the church like that. Wow. Now, that doesn't mean that they're not giving. They're just not, they're very selective in how they give to ministry faith-based institutions. They're more inclined to give to faith-rooted institutions than faith-based institutions. That's a whole different conversation. Faith-rooted institutions are doing more organizing. Faith-rooted institutions are the ones who are galvanizing and making policy changes and organizing in the community. They'll give to that. So for ministry in the 21st century, the ministry has to figure out what is going to be your variable, because the variable that the ministry does, ministry times variable equals SRE, sustainability, reproducibility, and engagement.
I like that. I like that.
So if a ministry has a variable that they attach themselves to, they can be sustainable, whether you are receiving tithes and offering, or if tithes and offering drop, it's something that's reproducible, because now you can teach this in the community to those who are in the pews and those who are outside of the pews. And it's engaging, which means now you're pulling people who will never come into your church on Sunday, but they will know that the church is there. And your variable, variables can be a school. Variable can be a senior living condition. It could be a car shop. It could be truck driving school, clinic, grocery store. It could be a catering place. It could be a rehabilitation center, restaurant, construction, whatever the case might be, resource center. That's what a ministry in 21st century has to figure out. It has to come up with that variable, because doing church how we did it back in my parents' time period, my grandparents, great-grandparents, that's not how church is done now. And the pandemic taught us that. You had churches trying to figure out what to do with their buildings during the pandemic, because the lights, the mortgage, the gas, the water still had to be paid, even though nobody was occupying that space. So what do we do with it? They had to get creative, and that's all that ministry has to be. Ministry in the 21st century, Dr. Leroy, has to be innovative. It has to be sustainable. It has to be reproducible, and it has to be engaging.
You nailed that right there, and that is so true about what I think what the church needs to look like in the 21st century. Why do you think that the church, and meaning some of the leaders of the church, some of the pastors, are having such a difficult time of acknowledging that, but then also seeing it and shifting to that?
I think it's just one of, like we said at the top, it's some fear in that. There's fear in that. There's also, getting your mind wrapped around separation between church and state, which I think that the last election with Trump shows you that there's really no separation between church and state. We can talk offline about that. Right? So, exactly. That's a fine line. It's a fine line. So I think ministry leaders, pastors, have to get to the point to where they understand that the product that, and I say this very loosely, the product that we are selling is not going to change. But when we look at the scriptures, those who were the prophets and the leaders in the biblical scriptural time had jobs. Jesus was a carpenter. Matthew was a tax collector.
Right.
For lack of a better way of saying it, Paul was a trained assassin. Before he was Saul, before he was Paul. You know what I'm saying? When you look at that, there was always this marketplace ministry that was going on, even in the biblical sense.
Mhm.
But now it's one to wherein we are not going to be able to browbeat the people
Right.
to pay their tithes.
Mhm.
If people understand that when they leave church on Sunday, they still got to go home to a refrigerator that doesn't have any food. They still got to go home to tomorrow. You got to pay your gas bill. They're going to cut your gas off. Tomorrow, Sunday, they got to go home and realize, I don't know about how it is out there where you are, but gas out here is almost $10. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
still got to put some gas in the car, and I got to go to work tomorrow. I can't work remotely anymore. These are all things that people are thinking about. And the church has got to change. Pastors got to change. But I think the struggle is pastors are scared and fearful because for some, not all,
Mhm.
it's unknown. That's uncharted territory.
Right. Right.
They don't know anything about being entrepreneurial because all they've ever done is ministry.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've said that too, in whatever, because I do um consulting for for ministry for
Mhm.
pastors. And what I found is that, and I tell some pastors, and some like it, some don't, but they have the theological down. They can bring a word, like no other. But
Right.
the business aspect of it, because it is, like you said, the light bill still gotta be paid. The electricity, it's the mortgage still got to be paid. All of those aspects of the church, that's real. The business part of it is real. So
Right.
you have to be able to handle that, and having yourself and having wise people around you to be able to show you how to do that. You have to be accepting of it and say, okay,
Right.
if that's not what I know is my lane, then let me have someone or know someone to put someone in my circle of impact, that can assist me with understanding that and move us into this 21st century. Because like you said, the God is the same, but the church is changing. It has to
Yes.
move it has to shift. Like you
Yes.
like you were saying, that the pandemic
Yeah.
certainly showed us that, you know.
Yes. It has to shift, man. Because if not, just the harsh reality is that pastors are leaving the ministry.
Mm,
Uh,
mhm.
they are either uh, um, they either being carried out by six, or they walking out with one finger in the air.
Yeah, yeah.
I've seen that happen.
Mhm,
Pastors are dying. Pastors are struggling
mhm.
mentally. Pastors are dealing with a lot. At the same time, there are some pastors who are saying, I don't want to do that anymore, and I'll just go be a pastor on staff somewhere.
Yeah,
And I, I'm telling you stuff that even I've thought about.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
I've thought about. I think it's easy for me to go be a pastor on staff somewhere. I have the years of experience. I'm getting ready to have the academic parchment behind that experience.
Mhm.
So I could easily go and sit. I could be a youth pastor, young adult pastor. I could be a intake pastor, discipleship, anything. But I think we have to understand that church, how we may have grown up in it, is changing. And there has to be something else that is feeding, quote unquote, feeding the beast of
Mhm.
doing ministry. And I think this ministry enterprise is something that pastors can get behind, because then it takes the pressure off of, for some of us, to be salespeople on Sunday and just get back to preaching and teaching the gospel.
Yeah, 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 and understanding that balance. I love that. Now you did a presentation that I absolutely thought was phenomenal. You and I have talked about it, and then those that are part of our our group in the economic realm in the Rethinking Church nation and organization. We've talked about it, and we see that there's such a need. Can you talk to us just a little bit about what you talked about in the presentation, and then as you and I talked briefly before we came on here, how we can get pastors and the church and entrepreneurs to understand what you've developed, the concept that you have, and what I call the black print for how we make our community strong.
Yeah, I mean, it's as we were sharing, it's ministry enterprise. I call it ministprise, and I have not gotten that term copywritten yet, but it's coming.
It's on the way. That's right.
It's on the way. It's ministry enterprise. It's looking at what is social enterprise, what is ministry, understanding that we have to move forward with that variable, that equation, ministry times the variable, making it sustainable, reproducible engagement. But then there's these five qualities of faith-based social enterprise that I've come up with, which is it has to be purpose-driven, it has to be resilient, it has to have duality thinking or thinking in duality. It has to be people focused, and it has to be outcome oriented. And so it has to have a purpose, and that has to be one of what is it that you see that your community might need. There's a, and it's not a ministry, but there's an organization here in Los Angeles called, they're called the East Side Riders. Mm-hmm. And what they do is they get young people together and show them how to build a bike. Mm. Those young people build their own bikes.
Wow.
And once they build them, then they go out, and they have different rides on Saturday, and it's a bike. I mean, it's some people would say, well, wow, it's just a bike, but that does something for that young man or that young woman in the community that has a lot of time, that keeps them out of certain alleys and streets and certain situations, to where now they're being not only working on building their own bike, but now they're getting mentorship. They're getting engagement from males and men in the community that work with that organization. That's a purpose. Maybe that is something that your church can do, because now you're struggling with getting your youth in, but you got to give the youth something to be attracted to. Correct. When it comes to the ministry. Mm-hmm. There's another organization that I know of, another church that I know of, that they purchased a bakery. Mm. And what they do is they employ those in the community, because they saw that there was a large population of homeless people. Okay. They employed those homeless people. They got connected to reentry programs for folks who are coming out of incarceration. They hire those people to be a part of that bakery. So now you're employing people. So it's one of those things to where as a ministry, you have to figure out where is God leading you? And sometimes you have to do that through the process of listening. Find out what your people, what gets them, what wakes them up in the morning, what keeps them up at night, what gets them up in the morning. Is it a daycare? Is it that you have men who really don't have their employment is kind of sketchy? Maybe you need to do a truck driving school. Mm-hmm. With the way things are nowadays, Walmart, you can get an owner operator, a person, their own truck that they own and operate, that now you're bringing resources into their household. So it's figuring out what's the purpose, and then it's resilient. It's always going to have that bounce back. And you got to think in a very dual fashion. It's ministry, but then you also have this enterprise over here that is is truly feeding the community.
Right.
And so they understand they can get the gospel, but now you're helping them with their life. So now you're doing more holistic type work. And it's people focused, and the outcome is that you are building a community. You're pouring money back into the community, which means the outcome is when certain people run for office, they're gonna come find your ministry.
Yeah. It has such an impact that they have to come.
They have to respect it. They have to respect it. Because now now you're feeding people's faith, but now you also are feeding people literally. So
I love it. And everything that you said, I want people, I call that, and I've said that the church needs to do this. It needs to have, and I call it a new approach to sin. And I mentioned this to you. And that's having a commitment to impacting the needs of the community. Because if you do, like you were saying, if you're listening to your congregation as a pastor, if you're listening to your community as a pastor, you'll see what the need is.
Right.
You'll see what that need is and say, you know what? And it's just like an entrepreneur. You'll see what the need is. As an entrepreneur, you say, what problem do I solve?
Right.
That's what every entrepreneur is in business for. What problem do I solve? And as the church and as pastors, you say, what problems can we solve with our ministry in the community that we have? And when we come from that mindset, then you said, if it's trucking, hey, how can we partner with a trucking, a trucking school? Or if it's a bakery, how can we partner with bakeries or those other types of employment industries? Or even like the young lady that I was telling you about earlier, the 28-year-old that has
transitional housing. That's a beautiful concept.
And that works. And that becomes, I said there's 5 pillars to every community. There's the family, educational system, government, business, and the church.
That's right.
That's the 5 pillars. And when those pillars work together, there's not one community, there's not one strong community that does not have all of those elements doing well.
Yep.
I promise you. Show me one, and I'll call you a liar. I certainly will.
And you know what though, Dr. Leroy, you're right. When you look at a community that is fully functional, all 5 of those things are working in concert with each other.
Yep.
And when you look at our community, when I say our community, when you look at the Black community, there's a breakdown. And I know quite a bit of that is because that's systemic.
Correct.
That's a systemic issue. But we've got to get back to creating Tulsa 5.0. I'm not even going to say 2.0. Tulsa 5.0. That's what we have to push forward into, to wherein, as I tell myself every morning, and I can be transparent and share this. I tell myself every morning, nobody's coming to save us.
Yep.
And that's my reasoning for getting up and doing what I do to try to create and to push forward in developing streams of income and wealth, because I know nobody's coming to save us.
Yeah.
So how do I do that? How do I teach other people to do that? And for me, it's all about community, because when you do things for the beloved community, it comes back to you. God, whatever you want to say, the creator, the universe, they flow that stuff back to you. When you put good stuff out there and you think about others and you make sure others are eating at the table, you're always going to be able to eat because you're feeding others.
Yeah, and I saw this quote the other day, and I posted it along with something else. I can't remember, but it says this. It says, you will never find brokenness where there is unity.
That's right.
You will
They
never
can't,
find brokenness where there's
they
unity.
can't live in the same, they can't live in the same place, man. They polar opposites.
I
It's
was like, that was so powerful.
profound. Yeah, yeah,
I said, and that's what we have to understand, I think, as a community, that it all begins, that healing that you were talking about, that solving the problem begins with the unity, the unification of us and understanding. Like you said, nobody's coming to save us. And here's the other piece to that. We have everything we need in order
in
to
the
be
house.
able to be successful.
Exactly. Exactly.
You know, we've been,
Every
go ahead.
everything that a church or ministry needs to begin living out ministry enterprise is in the house.
Yep.
Everything that they need is in the house.
Yep.
So yeah, yeah,
And I tell people that too, even within the churches, there's everything that you need. You can find teachers, you can find developers, you can find business owners, entrepreneurs. Everything you need is right within your congregation to do
right,
what it is that you do. And if you're meeting the need,
right.
if you were committed to meeting that need, I promise you that congregation will be right along with you and
That's right.
flowing into it. It's the
That's
same
right.
thing with your entrepreneurs,
Yeah,
and being leaders in entrepreneurship, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
I agree.
So I love that. I love that. So I want you to talk about how important is it for pastors to develop a ministry that is not silent and gives a voice to the community nowadays.
Oh man, that's vital. I mean, I think the ministry has to have a voice. I think that's the tension that we've seen over the last couple of years with BLM, with Black Lives Matter. It was doing something that it answered a call that others felt like the church should have been answering. And the tension was they were doing what some feel like the church should have been doing. And so the church should always be in a position to voice what is happening. I feel that at some level, all churches should be organizing, doing community organizing at some level.
Right.
Whether it's that you have, it's a church here, two churches actually, that were very good with feeding folks, and we did it too. We did it while the pandemic was going on. We fed. We teamed up with a ministry over here in Wilmington, which just because of that relationship, they are allowing us to use some of their space on Sunday. But we were able to feed over 3,000 families and over 7,000 individuals. I have two other churches that are their pastors are friends of mine. Pastor Tyrone Phillips and Pastor Peter Watts. They were caring for those that were in foster care and families in need during the pandemic. That you got to answer the call. It's figuring out what is it that you need to lean into. So the church has got to be doing that, and you got to figure out what that is. What is it that you lean into? Because I know it's this way in Baltimore, just like it is this way here in LA. There's a whole lot of stuff that's going on. So you can't ever sit back and say, no, I don't think the church has anything to say. Come on, man. We got homelessness. We got educational issues. We got mental, social, emotional issues, mental health. We got housing problems. We got folks that's not working. There's a lot that we could get behind. Divorce rate went up during the pandemic. Folks figured it out. I liked you more.
Yep.
I liked you more when I didn't have to be quarantined with you. I got to be quarantined, but I don't like you that much. So there's a lot of things that we could be leaning into that the church always has work to do.
Yeah.
Always. So we have to speak into that and figure out what your lane is. Now, everything, we got domestic violence. If that's your lane, then you run that lane, and you will find doors open in success when ministry finds the lane that it's supposed to be in. That's the same thing I tell our church. We have got to craft our DNA. And once we craft our DNA and we formulate what lane we're supposed to be in, you don't have to worry about people coming. Because there's something at the Potter House that makes people come. And a lot of times it's not TD Jakes.
Yep.
There's something else. My parents' church in Mansfield, Texas, Bethlehem Baptist Church, Pastor Michael Evans, he's the mayor of Mansfield, but at the same time, there's something that brings people to that church. And yes, his preaching is great and all of that, but they do stuff that is relevant, that attracts people. They built a senior citizen housing facility across from the church. Pioneer Place. That brings, when you do stuff like that, people just want to come just so they can be a part of it. So that's what pastors and ministries have to do in this time. Find their lane.
And I've said that, and I call it the Nehemiah complex. When Nehemiah was asked to build the wall, he didn't build it by himself.
Right.
It wasn't built until the people had a mind to build. and it was an understanding that I don't have to build the whole wall. If, like you said, if I stay in my lane and I build my portion of the wall, the person next to me is building their portion of the wall, and you move it all the way around, the wall gets built.
Come on, wall gonna get built. Exactly.
It's just, this is why I enjoy talking to you so much, because you have the innovativeness that you have, the understanding that you have, and what you're doing, what you're implementing, the things that you're doing. I people, hopefully pastors will see that and understand that, hey, nobody's coming to save us. Understand what the need is. Find your wall. Find your wall, find your lane, what it is that you do, and it will generate what the need. It will generate people coming because of, like you said, exactly. It's filling the need. It's solving someone's problem at the end of the day.
That's right.
Solving someone's problem. And I mean, you were absolutely right. The pandemic pointed out so much stuff that people didn't want to face, didn't want to, adhere to, and what people had to go through.
Right. Exactly. And people went through some stuff, man. And so people want to come back as something new, but at the same time, people want to know, what are you doing? What are you instituting? What are you building? What is happening? And so, that's what's important right now.
Yeah, and I think as we move out of the pandemic, there has to be another shift. There was one shift, like you talked about, coming into the pandemic, and then even during the pandemic, there was an adjustment and shifting. And now that we're moving out of it, there needs to be, or has to be, another shift as well. There's another adjustment that needs to be made. And whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you are a pastor of a church, that shift has to be made and has to be understood in order for you to be successful, and then in order for you to guide the people that that are following you, in order to be able to do it as well. Because, like you said, all of us have been through something in some kind of way in the pandemic, and being able to navigate that realm is vital to us moving forward. I mean, even if it's just learning something about yourself and about adjusting to yourself, because I think a lot of people didn't want to face themselves, and they were forced to face themselves during the pandemic because they couldn't run from themselves and other people.
That part.
You know,
Yeah, you had to deal with your stuff.
yeah.
And so in a way, things got comfortable. People got comfortable with going to bedside Baptist.
Right.
People got comfortable with being able to see who they wanted to see. You know, I can start off the morning with TD Jakes and end the night with Bishop Noel Jones, and I can feel everybody else in the middle, you know, my neighborhood pastor, my pastor, you know, all these things. I can be in church in Texas. I can be in church with R.A. Vernon. You know, I can do all these different things to where now the sexiness of church and the intoxication of church is changed.
Wow.
So now I don't have to get my fix by going into a building and sitting down for 2.5, 3 hours anymore. I don't have to do that. Within between 2 and 3 hours, I could have seen 7 ministries in 2 to 3 hours. And so now now all the, you know, and some people still do want it, but at the end of the day, most times, especially when we live in this generation where we can watch stuff on our phones and stuff like that. I mean, you know, all I want is a 20-minute sermon. I want 30 minutes is pushing, but if I can get a 10, 15-minute snippet, bam, I'm good to go. Or I may not watch it on Sunday because it's hot. The sun is out. I'm outside. So I'll pick it up on Monday, or I'll pick it up on Tuesday, or something like that. You know what I'm saying? And that's just where we live. So you got to figure out what is something else that the church can do. And this is a term that I got from my mom from talking to her. You know, she's in her mid 70s. Her term was, I want to remain relevant. And I've taken that on myself. I want to remain relevant. Sometimes relevancy is not by doing things the same old way. Sometimes relevancy is about pushing the envelope and figuring out how to be innovative and do it a little bit differently. I'm still preaching the gospel, but maybe I don't have to preach it within the 4 walls of the church.
Absolutely. Now, speaking of that, what advice would you give to a young minister coming into the ministry, and then also an entrepreneur that's that's just starting their journey into entrepreneurship? What advice would you give to them? Talk to them right now, if you can.
For a minister, if young cat coming into ministry, man, pack your bags and go the other way. Don't come into this thing right here. You see this gray hair? This come on. If you're not ready to live into this white fire, don't do this, man. But no, seriously, I would tell a young minister, young lady, or young man who's coming into ministry, don't lose your ability to dream. Don't allow for the dream to become stale. Continue to keep yourself in the midst of your dreams, because your dreams is where God is going to show you the creativity of who God is in your life. So don't stop dreaming. I think sometimes we get in the ministry, we feel like we got to do it. We got to do it based on the instructions on the back of the box, but you got to become so much of a culinary student of the gospel and ministry that you're able to figure out how to add a little bit more cup of this, or cut this in half, or double up on this. And, you know, you got to become a culinary student of the gospel. So there's creativity in that. There's innovation in that. So keep those two. Entrepreneur, you just got to realize that you're not going to, as an entrepreneur, you got to realize that you don't have any PTO time. You got to realize you don't have days off. You don't have sick time. You may not have health insurance. So as an entrepreneur, you got to realize you got to work. You got to get up early in the morning. You got to work late night. But take time and spend time quieting yourself so that you can listen to yourself breathe. Because it's in the breathing where you will figure out how to move in this entrepreneurial river. So that's my advice.
I love it. I love it. I love it. So what's next for Pastor Nelms and your business? What you have? Are you are working on anything as far as your ministry and as far as the business?
As far as the ministry is concerned, yeah, we are just we are really working around trying to discover and to determine what our DNA is, what our lane is. We've been going so long just doing church that now we need to figure out what our lane is. That's the church side. Entrepreneurial side, yeah, the big thing for me is the fall of this year, we're gonna start our pilot program. So we're looking for 5 to 10 young people between the ages of 16 and 24 to be a part of our pilot program at our Image Makers Academy.
Okay.
So that we can take them through that program and process. Also in the fall, we'll be launching our Legacy Bridge Community Development Corporation. So that's on the business side, church and business side.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Doing great things, big things, and it's sorely needed. It is so needed. And that's what one of the comments that I saw in the chat there, that saying that this is so needed.
Amen.
For what's going on and everything like that in our community. So how can people connect with you? How can they connect with the church, with the church if they want to see your services or come to your service if they're out in the California area, and then connect with you if they want you to come and teach what it is that you're teaching at their church? How can pastors connect with you?
Yeah, I would say they can connect with me. They can connect with the church through our website, which is www.choseng129.org. They can email at cgc129@gmail.com. And then to reach me personally, they can just email me at Pastor Cedric 41872@gmail.com. That's Pastor Cedric 41872@gmail.com.
Absolutely. Pastor, I always enjoy talking with you. I always come away from it feeling smarter from conversing with you because of the rich conversation that we have. And I think that we have a common passion for wanting us to be better and do better.
Yes.
I think
yes.
that's the connection. And I think that's what we have to have. We have to have a commitment to impacting.
Yes.
I'm gonna say, like, having a new approach to sin, y'all. A new approach to sin. And that's CIN, not SIN. Because if you have a commitment to impacting the needs of the community becomes stronger, it becomes better. And I know that our communities will be better because of pastors such as Pastor Cedric Nelms, who are doing the work in the community and putting forth the effort to make our communities better. So we can't help but be better and be able to see the black print that he's given us for how to be successful. Because at the end of the day, like we've said, nobody's coming to save us. And we have everything we need in order to be able to be successful. So, Pastor, I appreciate you. I thank you for coming and talking with us and just giving us some of your knowledge, information, and wisdom that you shared with us in everything we do. So I certainly appreciate it, and we will definitely be connecting because everything that we're doing and stuff like that. But I appreciate you coming on and talking to the people about about what you're doing, but about what can be done in the community as a whole.
Amen. Yeah, and I'm willing to help where I can. So just reach out.
So this has been another episode, y'all, of the Brand New Development Series brought to you by Black Professional Men and JNF Enterprises. And as you all know, it's 2022. It's building season. It's building season. What are you building in 2022? We want you to be better by the end of the year than you were at the beginning of the year. And the only way that you do that is by, hopefully, by bringing you individuals like Pastor Cedric, who show you how we can be better, not just individually, but collectively, how we can be better. So we appreciate you all for tuning in, and we will see you all next time.
Be blessed.